Okay, well, let's get started. Time being 9 o'clock, I'd like to call to order this meeting for the American Rescue Plan Committee of Kane County, Friday, July 9th, 2021. I am Committee Chair Jared Sanchez. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Bates?
Here.
Brown?
Here.
Froz? Martin?
Martin here.
Molina?
Molina present.
Strathman?
Strathman here.
Sanchez?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here. Do we have anyone here or online for public comment? I don't see anybody that I don't recognize. Moving on, Chairman's comments. Just very briefly, I want to thank everyone here and other members of the county board for voting to allow me to be the chairman of this committee. I'm a joker at heart, but this is something I take very seriously, so I appreciate it. Last year, John Hoshite chaired the CARES Act committee, and when he moved on from the county, I talked to him about who could chair the committee going forward, and he said, somebody, whoever it is, has to be somebody who is good or is really seeking to build consensus. And that is definitely something that I am very much interested in always, is building consensus. So I'm no John Hoshite, but I'm definitely going to do my best. And once Froz gets here, I think we're actually going to have full in-person attendance for this committee, which may be a first in the post-COVID era. So yes, thank you all for being here and for allowing me to steer the ship, so to speak. So let's move on to our discussion items. I would love to say I have some great master plan that we've all concocted behind the scenes, but that's not the case. The CARES Act actually was a little more simple than the American Rescue Plan. We're dealing with more moving parts, more opportunities, and a much longer timeline. So I do have a rough outline in mind, but it will require all of our participation to really give it some shape, some form, and some definite base to it. So starting off, we have our investment status, and we have our treasurer, Mr. Kilborn. I always want to call him Chief. Mr. Kilborn, give us an update on our investments.
Good morning. Thank you, Jared. Mr. Sanchez. When these monies were received, I met with Madam Chair and Joe Onzik mid-June to discuss a potential spending window, or when these funds would be needed to be spent, because there's a difference between investment and on-demand accounts. The three of us came together with the decision that about 25 million, or a little less than half of what was there, could be invested with a 6-month window out, meaning that it's not necessarily available immediately. My office has almost completed that investment at this point. We're meeting with one more bank this morning to close or secure a CD. So what we currently have is 10 million in commercial paper, which is at 11 basis points, 5 million in a T-bill at 4 basis points. We have a $5 million CD with the Kane County Teachers Credit Union at 25 basis points. And we are meeting this morning with First Secure Community Bank for 2 CDs, one for 1 million and one for 4 million, that we will close that and have that investment completed. When that is done, we will have 25 million of that first deliverable. First tranche, I think, was the discussion point at the last meeting, the definition of tranche, will be invested in a 6-month window, giving us better, but not great returns, but certainly much better than the remaining funds, which are with a First American Public Funds premium yield money market account, only earning 3 basis points. But the decision with that is the liquidity, being able to pull that money out and spend it when and where needed.
Yeah, that's something that's important. We're not tying that money up. We can't touch it for 6 months, and we try to figure out what to do with that.
Correct. And, not to drive anyone crazy, but if the office didn't have the direction of safety first, liquidity second, and yield third, I could put this all in Bitcoin, and we could be at the mercy of Elon Musk or China as to what Musk tweets or what China tells our central banks to do. But obviously there are not just directions in my office, but state and federal laws is what we can do.
It's tempting to put it in a crypto.
It could be 100 million one day, or it could be 3 million the next day. So I get it. And for those who don't know me, I do have a sense of humor, so I would never do that. It's not to alarm anyone here. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Bates.
yes.
Well, this is loud. I would like to thank you for doing this. I brought this up at a meeting a few weeks ago, and as I recalled, I was poo-pooed at the time, laughed at. So thank you for reinvesting this money out of, a checking account. I appreciate that.
Yes, and like I said, it was a cooperative effort between Madam Chair and Joe Onsick and I to decide
Thank you, Madam Chair.
what funds were available to put aside
Mhm.
so that it would not handcuff, going back to my old job, handcuff you all in spending
Mhm.
what you need to spend in the first part of this tranche.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions or comments for Treasurer Kilborn? Mr. Shepro?
There are arbitrage restrictions on all this money, is that right?
Yes, there are definite restrictions as to where you can put it, how you can put it, and yes, sir.
I mean, in terms of like, we can't park it and even if we wanted to and just collect interest.
No, I defer to Madam Chair.
You were booed,
Walk with
maybe?
that microphone.
Get my coffee.
Hard to think without it.
We cannot use the money as an interest-bearing account to do operating costs at all. The money is a short-term investment that goes out to the community appropriately by the decision of this committee and then ultimately the board. So short-term CDs that we can rely on to withdraw the money quickly, obviously low interest rate, but that's what it is right now, which is also to our benefit for if we want to buy anything. The interest rates are so low, so it's a double-edged sword, but the money has to be cash available for spending. And to remind the committee, and I'm sure the chair of the committee, Mr. Sanchez, will share this with you as well, all money has to be allocated by 24. Signed, done deal. All has to be expended by 26. So this is a lot of money to really give careful consideration if that's why the money has to remain liquid.
But earn interest at the same time.
But yeah, there is interest. But I do believe, and Vince, I think, can share more information on that. The interest has to be put back into the ARP funds. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would have to look more into that, but you can't use any of the funds as like a rainy day fund kind of situation. So as long as that is not, as long as that's being avoided, then, but I will have to look more into exactly what to do with the interest.
Okay, I think that's, I think to answer Mr. Shepro, and for all of us, that's an important thing we have to make note of.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And it's similar to the CARES Act money that we had last year. We did invest that, and I think our returns ended up at around $110,000. And we've put that into administrative costs. So that's, it'll be a similar pattern this year. I don't know what we could expect to see as far as returns, but we'll get there as we go along. So thank you, Mr. Kilborn.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Okay, the next discussion item, reporting requirements. And Blair, I'm just going to share my screen for a couple of these things. Give me 1 second. Okay. So we have a lot of information to go over this time, as far as homework, as far as guidance and documents that have been given to us from the Treasury Department. We're not going to go in detail on all of that stuff today, so don't worry. But I did want to cover a couple of things as far as reporting, just so the committee is aware of the kind of timelines that we do have as far as the information we have to send back to the Treasury. So here, the first one coming up is the interim report. Let me adjust the view here. Okay. So the interim report, that's coming up soon. And we'll talk later about administrative help and the idea being that we're going to have somebody, some staff that will be able to get this report done and turned in on time for us so that we don't have to rely on our finance department to do this. They're still working on closing out the CARES Act fund stuff. I mean, that's time out of their day away from other county activities they're taking. So we're very much going to lean on outside help for that. But the interim report is coming up. It's due August 31st. And it's really just getting your foot in the door reporting wise. It's the first shot out. You're not expected to have everything figured out by that point in time, but they do want to know what have you been working on as of July 31st, I believe is the end date. So we'll have that turned in on time, but it's just the first thing that we have to turn in for the Treasury Department. The second one is the project and expenditure report. So that's something that's going to be a quarterly report. I think the first one is due October 31st, Halloween. This one is going to have a lot more detail in it. We're going to have more of our plan figured out and enacted and allocated by that point. So it's going to have a lot more detail. We'll absolutely require our financial staff that we will hire to do this kind of reporting because it's going to be very detailed. And again, after we start reporting on the project and expenditures, it's going to be a quarterly report. So we'll have 4 of these coming out every year. They want to know a lot of different things. Part of the information that they are asking for is how our projects are helping economically disadvantaged communities. And they have some information here to help you qualify what that is. And the qualified census tract is what you use. And so there's a lot of good information there that our team will be able to take to help inform us on our projects if they're going to be something that helps the economically disadvantaged. It's kind of it's in the ARP, but it's sort of not an unwritten or unspoken assumption that we are going to be doing our best to really help the economically disadvantaged and turn around our economic situation in the county. Okay, so the next one is the annual performance report. Now this one, we will have to actually post on our website. So this is going to be something that is public forward. We're going to only be doing it once a year, but it's going to have an update on all of our projects, all of our expenditures, all the things that we're planning to do. There's a bare amount of information that they want us to put, but they do say you should consider fleshing things out a little bit more. How you speak to your constituents is how you want this report to be. So this is going to be a big deal coming from the committee. We're going to have to put a lot of thought and time into how it's written and what it says. We post these online right away once we give it to the Treasury. Some of the things that they look for, they want to know about how projects, again, help support a strong and equitable recovery from the pandemic, and also how the funds will support communities in the jurisdiction. So it's just another way of saying, are you taking all the money for yourself? Are you putting it out into the community? You know, what's your plan look like? And I don't expect that we're going to be the county that is number one in giving all the money out to the community and figuring that plan out. But I would like us to be somewhere in a good number out there showing that, yes, we're taking care of ourselves, but we're also really taking care of our constituents along the way. And promoting equitable outcomes, that's another one. Community engagement is something else that will be a part of that report. They want to know how we're actually getting feedback from the community, and we'll get into that a little bit later, especially when we talk about like the town halls. So community engagement, again, it's just outlined there. It's not saying you have to engage the community. It's just sort of implied that you are going to, but to what degree and in what fashion and what way. Use of evidence, that's another one. We have any projects where we develop the projects based upon evidence. So we know there's a certain amount of need for certain mental health services, and we can show that with the data. Then that's what they want to know here. How much of that kind of stuff are they using? And they actually give us some information clearinghouses and recommendations for others. So there's a lot here just on this one page. There's many links to so much information that's going to be very helpful for our team to maybe flesh out some of the projects that we come up with. Like, okay, we got an idea for helping mental health services. We can use some of this evidence to support why we do it this way instead of this way, or something along those lines. So it's going to be very interesting to see how much we can use these kinds of clearinghouses for developing our ideas. Okay, our next point of discussion, does anyone have any questions about the reporting requirements before I move on?
Was this report,
Ms. Bates?
Mr. Chairman? Was this report in some of those links that you sent it? Did you send us a link to this report?
The main treasury page for the state and local recovery fund on the treasury website has this document
Okay.
in it. So it's not, I didn't hand this link out yet, but it's on the main treasury page for
Okay.
the state and local.
Thank-
So you can find it there.
Mr. Sanchez, if I
Madam Chair.
may, I would just like to make one modest correction in what you said. It's not,
Sure.
the money is not for us, it's for the county, and we serve the people of the county.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, when I say us, I mean internally.
But just
yeah.
clarification.
And we are serving the people every day. So, okay, moving on, we'll go to administrative staff requirements. As you see, we have a discussion later on approving RFPs for administrative support. So we will need a consensus on that, and the documents were sent to everyone on the committee ahead of time. So hopefully you've had a chance to at least glance over it, see if there's anything that you have questions or comments on. But one thing we learned from the CARES Act work last year is that we have to rely on outside help as much as possible to get this stuff done. The political climate was different. It was more of an emergency environment as well with COVID. We were in the thick of the pandemic. So we didn't go as far into the getting outside administrative help direction as we could have. And we learned from that. I think we just sent out our last round 2 business check about 2 months ago, just to give you an idea. I mean, that's Scott Berger's team working up until, April or May of 2021, just to close out our big program. So a few different things. One, we want to have a firm that, like we had last year, KEB, they verify everything, they double check everything. If we run a grant program, they make sure everything is looking good. But we want to really utilize the firm this time in a more expansive way so that we don't have state's attorneys, members doing the work for us, or Scott Berger's office running programs for us, or the finance director's office. We want to have a firm that can do pretty much everything for us. And as you see in the documents that were handed out, we're looking for a firm that can have a project manager that they can give to us to devote to this work, or we will have a firm that does all these other things for us and then separately hire a project manager that will help oversee everything that we're doing. They will coordinate all of our efforts. It'll be a line of communication. They may even need some administrative support staff of their own to get things done. But that's something we didn't have last time that is really essential this time for us to get this project done in a good manner that's not going to leave our people hanging. Another staff member, besides the administrative support for this committee, which so far it seems everyone is in support of, we are going to want to have financial staff that is going to do all the work that Joe Onzig's people have been doing for the past year and a half or so, or however long it's been. Like I said, they're still working on closing out the CARES Act program, and that's time out of their day. Mr. Martin.
I had a question before we get too far away from the major consultant who will be our major consultant.
Yeah.
The last time when we chose it, actually, we didn't choose it. The state's attorney's office chose it.
Mhm.
Did we have a review from the state's attorney's office? Were they pleased? Were they satisfied with the quality of the work that we got? I mean,
With KEB last year?
Yeah.
My understanding is that they were. I haven't actually heard an official
well, I mean,
word on it.
I assume they're going to be one of the contenders here, and
Yeah.
and I would just like to know ultimately what the people who had to engage with them on a regular basis felt about their professionalism and competency as we evaluate this.
Yeah, we will certainly
Moving
take
forward.
that into consideration because I imagine they would want to apply for the work. I didn't work directly with KEB, but my experience with getting information from them, they seemed responsive. They seemed to do a good job. But I don't
Well, I'm
have
just saying, I'd like,
Yeah.
that's a good, to me, past experience is the best
yeah,
source of analysis. So.
absolutely.
Mr. Sanchez.
Oh, yeah,
Burgess here.
Oh, Surgis, go ahead.
In following up on that last comment by John, I guess I have asked several times in the past about the audits and how, how positive or negative we did on the audits. And everybody has said we've sailed right through. Is that not the measure to be looking at? Or John, is there some other concern that I'm missing?
Well, no, I mean, that's certainly relevant, but we're talking, I think, about a little broader responsibilities at this point in time than just naked compliance considerations. And I think the fact that we had a good audit is a great step forward. But, when you analyze consultants that you work with, sometimes you can't, at least in my experience, you can't articulate a list of 10 things that were positive and minuses, but you have kind of inchoates in your head that said, yeah, I liked working with this group. And I just want to make certain that we include the state's attorney in our analysis so that we know what those who had a direct working relationship with the consultant had to say.
Yeah, Mr. Shepro,
Microphone. The point that was just made.
microphone.
Oh, sorry. Shepro, the audit is only the final imprimatur that you did it right. It doesn't really address how you got there, whether it took too long, whether people were overworked. And I think the points that you were making earlier is not so much that we would fear the final review as the lessons that were learned and the overworked staff and the crazy hours and all that. I think that goes more to how the process worked, which I think was Mr. Martin's question, really, as opposed to the final outcome.
Yeah, we'll need a full report from the state's attorney's experience on the firm that we worked with last year, because the scope of work is much more broad in what we're looking for this year. And we're going to be retaining their services for a longer period of time as well. So we got to make sure we choose the right one. And then also with the administrative assistant for this committee, I know I've spoken with all of you that it's, something that we didn't have last year. We had weekly meetings, which we're not going to do this time. But we weren't able to get minutes until, it was way too much work for our staff to get those done in time. So I would like, after our meetings, 2 days after, there's typed notes that give everybody an idea of what was discussed, what projects are happening, what the status of them are, and also things that are going to need to be followed up on so that we're not getting lost in the shuffle, because last year it was crazy. It was so fast paced. Somebody got to answer that. It's not me. I didn't hit the emergency button, Blair. Is that what that is? Mystery Operations. It sounds like a band name. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Miss Allen.
thanks so much. Am I correct that what we're discussing right now is what DuPage described as their administrative backup team? And they got a lot more money than we did, and they talked about spending about $400,000 for 4 staff people, plus probably costs of materials and so on. Is that what we're discussing right now?
Essentially, yes. Yeah.
And I just wanted to toss into the ether also that when we're looking for this consultant, we're also looking for someone who's enlightened. If someone has had some experience before and can add to our pool of knowledge, that would be very helpful, right?
I agree. And I think that would be a consideration we have when we look at, especially the project manager position. That's going to be very important to know that these people have experience with the kind of work that we need them to do.
Thank you, sir. Though I'm not sure anyone's ever done this before, so we're going to be inventing some of it as we go along.
Get close. All right. Any other questions or comments on administrative requirements? All right, let's move on. Revenue recoupment. So this is a big topic for everyone. How much revenue can we take? How much revenue should we take? So we had our interim report. They're asking for my understanding of my reading of it is in the interim report, they want to know if we're taking our first year of revenue recoupment. And I think that is something we definitely should do. But we had Mr. Onzik give us his presentation with the numbers showing with the 4.1% revenue growth rate that is outlined in the plan, how much money that would bring to the county, how much money that would leave for everything else. So when we're looking at this, there are two numbers that are the most important to me. It's the total here of lost revenue. And then down here is the TBD, to be determined. So this is, the TBD is everything that's after our revenue recoupment, which includes our own purposeful uses of it. So we have two different pools that we can draw from to get things done, to make projects happen, to provide government services. So if we're going to be doing projects that fall within the American Rescue Plan outline, we may not want to take this full amount because how much is going to be left for all the other projects we run in the community? I think last year, we spent about $19 million in my napkin math, putting money out in the community, business grants, supporting not-for-profits and all the other things we did outside of the municipal allotment. So if we were to take the full amount of revenue, that would be 62 million, and then the rest only 17.7 million. So just something to consider. He did show us another slide at a 2% revenue growth rate, which we saw as well. The question was asked since then, what about a 3%? Maybe the 2% is a little low, 4.1% is a little high. Let's look at a 3%. So that's where we have this. I had Mr. Onzik crunch the numbers, which he did and provided in the middle of the night. The guy is tireless, and I can't thank him enough for the work that he does. So if we were to go for a 3% revenue growth rate, that would be 49.7 million in our revenue recoupment fund, and then 30.7 for everything else, internal and external requests under the ARP. So just to give you an idea, if we go in a smaller direction, what that could look like. And then here is the 2% figures that Mr. Onzik gave us originally. So 26.2 and then 54.3 going out to the community or also to internal uses. So a bit of a sliding scale we may be able to work with. I just wanted you guys to all see those numbers, and I can send this to you later if you want to look at it in more detail. Yeah, I just got it the other night and I forgot to send it to all you guys, so my apologies. Mr. Martin.
Are there a different set of restrictions on what we do with lost revenue recoupment than there are with other expenditures?
Yes, there's a different set of restrictions, and the restrictions are fewer. So it's kind of vague, and we do hope for more guidance to give us more details, but pretty much government services is what it is. If we wanted to build buildings or roads or whatever it is that governments do, we can spend that money on that. We can't put it in investments and things like that, rainy day funds.
Let me just make a point that kind of expands on Madam Chair's comment that when we say the county, we're not at odds with the rest of the world. We are providing services for the rest of the world. And what we do to the benefit of the county's long-term health it has potential for being more potent to the benefit of our constituents than short-term money. So I look upon the county as the most important of the entities, frankly. To protect our economic interests, protects all 532,000 people. And I just, I'm kind of I'm premature in drawing my line in the sand, but I feel very strongly about that before we apply money to short-term benefits, we need to make certain that we have addressed the long-term issues that will ultimately affect all the taxpayers.
Absolutely. And I do have some comments on that in the internal external requests section about, short-term versus long-term uses and needs.
Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, may
She had her hand up.
I'd like to follow
Madam
up
Chair,
on, with what I can't get the words out, what Mr. Martin has said, because I feel so strongly about what you just said in
You turn
support.
the mic
Oh,
up.
in support of what you just said. Any investment that we make into the community, whether it is our investment or the investments that we give directly to support the communities, to me is not short-term funding, but a long-term investment in their health and well-being. For instance, if we do Wi-Fi, enabling Wi-Fi to get through areas of the county that are not, that do not have it, our communities that may be compromised, who are working at home, still have children at home, to make sure that Wi-Fi is no longer a want, it's a critical need. It's no less of a need than having a telephone line. So those are the kind of long-term investments I'm thinking of. I'm hoping that we'll be able to come to an agreement with. The federal government is also looking at those, but to me, those are very critically important to public health, to education, to job development and growth, to our own economic development, to our agricultural community. So I'm hoping that as we move forward, as we look at however the split is going to be, that to your point, these are all going to be long-term investments rather than short-term money to help support an immediate need, but we're going to help support needs towards the future, because this money is a one-shot deal. We're never going to get this kind of money again in our lifetime, I'm hoping.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Bates.
I think that, speaking of drawing lines in the sand, that we need to consider long-term and short-term, because I believe that the spirit of the American Rescue Plan is a springboard effect, that we want to use things that may be short-term but necessary to rescue someone, but also long-term, such as water, broadband, things that will be long-term investments. But I especially want to make sure that we are thinking in terms of social infrastructure, long-term social infrastructure. So that's my line in the sand.
And perhaps my choice of saying line in the sand was a little bit
Yeah, not yet.
Well, you did preface it by saying it's a bit premature, so you're out. Don't worry.
Don't forget, sand is by water, and
Yeah.
water will move the line.
Yeah, high tide. Ms. Shepro.
Yeah, again, not to dwell on the line in the sand, my understanding is that the revenue recoupment is not, oh, we lost this revenue, let's take it and put it in the bank. It is really a portal that then gets you into an expanded field of eligible activities.
Mhm.
And so from the and I guess this is a question. If you identify a number in the interim report, I take it you are not precluded from amending that number as you move forward. So
That is my understanding as well.
Could we bring the state's attorney up? Would he have any information about what we can and cannot do with the county level?
With the money that we recoup? Sure.
Are you so directly talking about the recoupment of revenue? That is correct. So as Mr. Sanchez had indicated, it can be used for government services. So as Mr. Onzik has identified, through the Treasury, there's a formula, and through that formula, you can only use a certain amount of revenue recoupment from these funds. So look, and I think that's the discussion, is how much of that you want to use, and that can only be used for government services. It is a very broad category of the four that I gave a presentation on. So, but I guess the idea or spirit of it is this county lost money due to the pandemic, and those funds are recouped to get you back to a place that you would have used for government services had you not lost it. So you can use any recoupment of revenue for any government services that you intend to use. If that Helps.
Yeah, it's more broad usage, but we will have to report on how we are using that money. So this is something that is different than last year with the CARES Act, where we got a lot of money for payroll reimbursement, and we were able to, then now we just had, 40 million extra dollars in our budget all of a sudden, and we could do whatever we want with it. And we still have, about 7 million in that special reserve fund. There are no restrictions on it. With this, there are some restrictions, but we have to report on it. It has to be part of our reporting to the community and to the Treasury Department, how we are using it, how we are justifying it within the parameters of the guidance that we receive. So that's also something to keep in mind as well. Ideally, whatever we do with the recouped revenue money would still be within that spirit of what the ARP is trying to do, which is, emergency relief where needed, but also economic recovery in general. So that's the ideal, at least. Okay, so we have some.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Bates.
One more comment. So the spending focus of the American Rescue Plan, this is from NACO's document, is to address negative economic impacts such as harm to workers, families, small businesses, and nonprofits or impacted industries. So I want to keep that idea in mind that we are still in a recovery mode. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have some decisions to make, not today, but going forward, I think maybe in the next couple meetings, of how much revenue overall that we want to take and start the discussions of what we're going to do with that. Not to put a little fly in the ointment, but I did ask the state's attorney if we wanted to, say, build a giant telescope on a big hill somewhere because we think that astronomy will connect people to the stars and make them feel better in general. And that's going to help our people, right? This is just a hypothetical example. And it's going to cost $60 million. Well, we're getting 51 million this year. Could we just take that 51 million, recoup that as revenue, start applying that to the giant telescope, and then next year when we get our other 51 million, take that, the remaining 9 or whatever, put it, and then do the rest with the remaining? And the response was essentially no. The recommendation is that we actually go on a year-by-year basis, that we, whatever revenue money that we do recoup, we do it annually, not in 1 or 2 lump sums. So that just is good for us to know as far as strategy for how we're going to develop ideas for this money of revenue recoupment. If we have big projects, that need money now, we don't have it all for that project. It could get in the way of some things or change our plans. Mr. Martin?
Does the same 26 deadline apply to this money?
Yeah, all the money that comes from the ARP, it has to be allocated by the end of 2024, and it has to be spent, services rendered, checks written, and everything by end of 2026. Mr. Shepro.
So does that mean that you can't do a multi-year project, like build a bridge where you're going to use half the money this year and get half the next year?
Well, I think we can do multi-year projects, but we just have to be strategic in how we plan out the funding for it, because the recommendation, unless the guidance from the Treasury changes, the recommendation is that we take the revenue recoupment money on an annual basis. So there will be money sitting, possibly in investments, collecting some interest while we
Because I wasn't clear why you couldn't do your telescope the way you outlined it.
I'm a big proponent of a giant telescope in Kane County, but that's just me. So I don't know about you guys. So that's just something.
Sturgis here.
Oh, Mr. Sturgis, go ahead.
And does it matter which star you're looking for? If it's Ringo, does that play into effect any at all?
Just need a strong vessel and a star to steer her by.
Here we go. Hey, question. Did you, in the first go around with the other monies, the line continued to move? Is it your anticipation with these that the rules that we have up front now are cement, or will we see that line change and we need to be adaptive as well?
Well, my recollection of last year is that, yes, guidance updated and rules changed, so to speak, but it only seemed to broaden the horizon of what we could do at the time. I'm assuming that will also be the case here. We are getting guidance updates as they come out. And the interim final report, I think that's something I forgot to mention under the reporting section. The interim final rule, not report, that's the basic text that everything else is coming from. That is still an interim rule, and it's going to be finalized. They're taking public comments on that up until July 16th. So if there's anything that we come up with that we want answers to, or that we think should be clarified or included, we can filter that through our staff up to the Treasury up until July 16th. And they will include those questions, comments, and concerns in their final rule. I assume it'll be called the final rule at that point, not the interim final rule. So once that is finished, I don't know if there will be updates to the guidance at that point. There may, or it may be just for clarification purposes, but it is somewhat fluid right now, but I don't think in a way that should scare us or prohibit our thinking. Mr.
Thank
Shepro.
you so
Yeah,
much.
I think
Terry.
I asked at the bigger briefing that we had about what does interim final rule mean? And my impression is that it is an administrative law term, and interim doesn't necessarily mean interim. Interim, at the state level, we have interim rules that have been in effect for 20 years. So, but I do think that the example of the previous CARES Act is that far from being in concrete, it's more like Jell-O. And as people discover things that are troublesome, the Treasury seemed to have never gone backwards, but expanded deadlines, definitions, et cetera. And frankly, I don't know that we should expect that these are going to be frozen in concrete. I know you don't freeze in concrete, but after July.
So yeah, so that's where we're at. Always going to be refreshing the page every day, looking for new updates to the FAQs and other guidance. But July 16th is the deadline for the interim final rule. Madam Chair?
I'm back to thinking about our recoupment money and working for the public good, the county. I know we have projects that have been discussed in some detail by our department heads, which directly reach out to the communities, a variety of different communities for a variety of different purposes. Perhaps as we make this decision on how to allocate the funds, we can ask them to bring their thoughts very quickly to us so that this committee will have a better idea of what they've been looking at. Some of the work they've been planning has been years in the making, and they've just been waiting for this opportunity to have some magic resource come by, or just bide their time until a potential grant would come through. That way we'd be able to have a better idea of what is required internally to the support of the county, and make a better decision of what our recoupment may be with all projects in line before we start thinking about if we're going to be 2%, 3%, or 4% funding.
Yeah, as I said before, my personal recommendation would be that at our next meeting, we pass a resolution to take the first year of revenue recoupment so that goes into our interim report. We're in the system, we get the process started, and then we have some time to really talk about this overall plan for how much of that revenue recoupment we're going to take, what we're going to do with it, weighing it against the needs of the community that come to us, our internal needs, whatever ideas we come up with when we know we have the money, those kinds of things. There's a lot of conversations we're just not ready to have today. Ms. Bates?
So I don't understand something that is the water, Jody from the Department of Environmental and Water Resources gave us a list of projects that could be done according to water rescue and preservation. And so would that go under the recoupment or the public?
So those are the kinds of things that we'll have to
Okay.
figure out as we go along. Once we see all of the ideas that come to us,
Because-
categorize them
okay.
into, will this be a recoupment project or would this still fall under the guidance of the ARP plan?
Because
So
water
how do
is
we
one
wanna
of
do
the
that?
main
Right,
projects.
of course. So, and we always want to be within the guidelines. So if we have something that doesn't fall under ARP, then we know that can go into revenue recoupment. But yeah, that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. In preparing for this part of the meeting, I started looking more closely at the interim final rule about this topic of revenue recoupment. And I may be wrong, so we'll have to get some verification of this. But my reading of it is that with revenue recoupment, you can either take 4.1% revenue growth rate for your formula, or the average of the previous 3 pandemic years. And I didn't see anything in there. There may be something, but I didn't see anything that says, oh, well, if you want to do a sliding scale, if you want to do 3% or 2%, then you could do that. So that could be in there. But I was looking and I'm like, okay, this is a little different than I thought. I'm not a financial wizard. I fully admit that. I'm very open about that. Financial calculations are not my wheelhouse, but I was reading it last night and it was just concerning, because if we don't want to take this much money for revenue recoupment, do we have to? So I just started to look at, oh shoot, I don't have the file open. I thought I had a file open. 1 second, because I did put some numbers together for us to take a look at. If we have to take the 4.1%, if we have no other option but to do that, what could that look like? So this is my quick math that I did last night. Part of the conversation has to be, do we take all or some? If it's only 4.1% that we can take, these are the numbers that we would have if we decide to not do all 4 years of recoupment. Maybe we decide to only take 2 years worth of recoupment or 3 years. And so these are the numbers that going off of Joe Onzik's slides. If we just were to take 1 year of revenue recoupment, that would give us 7.4 million, leaving 73 million for everything else. 2 years, and so on. So you can see here, we have, if I am correct, we have some options here outside of the sliding 3 or 2%, of just saying maybe we only take 2 years, maybe we only take 3 years of revenue recoupment. And these are what those numbers look like. So Madam Chair.
Has that been checked by state's attorney yet? Or is that?
Like I prefaced,
Is that just a napkin math?
Yeah, because when in looking at the reporting and compliance and reporting guidance, it talks about the formula in detail, and that's a section that I personally haven't spent a lot of time reading myself, because that's for the financial people. But I saw that it was an either or scenario.
So is the question on what formula to use, or is it?
Can we do a sliding scale?
Take 1 year, 2 year.
Is it only 4.1% or the average of the 3 previous pandemic years or pre-pandemic years?
And I believe from Joe Onzik's presentation, there was 2 ways to calculate it, and he recommended using the 4.1% because that would give you the biggest cap amount of money to use for government services. I believe if you did go the other route, it wouldn't allow the county to use as much for revenue recoupment. As far as how much you want to use per year, it's my understanding that 4.1% formula is the cap. You can use as much of it you want, but you cannot use over that amount for under that section. It's you're really stopped at that amount. So
yeah, so we're going to get the final word on this, but I referred to the interim rule after looking at the guidance report, and I just didn't see anything that mentioned you can do anything but 4.1% or the average of the 3 pre-pandemic years. So that's the language that we're going to have to find in order to do a 2% or 3% revenue recoupment. Because if we can't find it, then we're going to be beholden to the 4.1%.
yeah, and
because it's the higher of either the 3 years or the 4.1. That's what it says. It's
Normally
whatever's
that would be
greater.
a limitation, and I mean, not a.
Mr. Shepro,
Yes,
microphone?
sorry.
Microphone.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's kind of like a safe harbor if you do it that way, you can get up to 4.1, but
So we'll get verification on that. But I just wanted to put that out there if the reading of that is correct. These are some of the numbers we're looking at. So it's a different way we would be talking about slicing up the revenue recoupment money. Ms. Bates.
Don't go anywhere. So if we chose the 4.1% formula, that would be our cap. That would not be how much we had to use, correct?
The maximum.
That would be the maximum. So we could still use much of that money for other programs than as the recoupment?
Yeah, so like you brought up the example for the water, that is a separate category. So if you want to do lead abatement, you could put money towards that, and then money from the recoupment towards government services, however you want to, but you can't go over that amount with the revenue recoupment.
Could we also go out to nonprofits and things like that?
Yes, that would be.
We wouldn't
under-
have to go up to that 67 million, what is it? I think that would be an embarrassment to spend $62 million inside and not go more out to the community. So whatever formula we use, we still have that flexibility.
Correct. The Treasury gave the guidance of the 4 different categories on how you can spend this money.
Okay.
So you can divide it up between the 4 categories, however this board wishes. But that's what the guidance is for. And so when it comes to revenue recoupment, you cannot go over that 4.1%.
But you can go under it.
You can go under.
And if I may, Ms. Bates, we are going out to the community.
Pardon me?
We are, we are not keeping the money. For instance, if it's the 62 million, if that's an accurate number that we're looking at for the 4.1 for government services, if we move forward with Ms. Wolnick's issue of water and making sure that the water is going to be stable and safe for future growth in Kane County, that's certainly going out to the community. If we're looking at social justice issues that need to be done and helping support that for criminal justice reform, that's certainly going out to the community.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so perhaps, Vince, this is something, if we can't find this answer in the reading ourselves, if we could send that up to the Treasury before the 16th to have them clarify if there is a sliding scale we can apply.
Absolutely. We will look into it, double check to get you an accurate answer. And if not, we can definitely submit a question to the Treasury. So
I would have had this figured out well before this meeting, but it came up last night. It took time away from the notes I was putting together. I'm like, oh, this might not be good. So let me.
This is very good.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea, if that is the direction we have to go in, then we know we don't have to take all 4 years. We've already been instructed to go annually for our revenue recoupment. So we do have time to formulate our plan, be very strategic, be very intelligent about how we take and spend this money. So going forward with the revenue recoupment, obviously we have to figure this all out. There is a consideration of the process. Let's say we take 60 million. How do we determine how that is spent? Does it go to all of the committee, like every committee in the county just comes up with ideas and then sends it to finance, and then hopefully everything is kosher and eligible and doesn't exceed our amount? Or do we have, let's say, all the committees and department heads that report to them come up with ideas and plans that could be used, this money could be used for, and then filter that through the ARP committee so that we know it's fitting within our plan? That's a consideration that we'll have to determine. I don't want to have it all figured out today, but in the next couple of meetings, I think that part at least is something that we can figure out, is how we will, our process for determining how to spend this revenue recoupment money. Reporting is still required, and I think that's all I have for this section. Does anyone have any other questions or comments on revenue recoupment? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on. Okay, federal programs, and I can stop sharing my screen here. At this meeting, I didn't want to give you guys too much, but perhaps at the next, I'll have a short presentation on other federal programs that are out there that are doing things that fall within the ARP guidance, because if we can get some other federal money to make some of these projects happen in the community, we should probably do that. And then that gives us more options and opportunities for this ARP money. We don't want to double services. Like with for example, the rental assistance money that came through first a couple months ago, we don't need to do a rental assistance program with this ARP money because that already exists. That money is already there. I know speaking with Michael Isaacson the other day, there are community block grants for mental health services that he's going to be looking into and possibly even having a grant writer go after some of the stuff for the public health department because there's a lot of stuff out there. So that is something that we want to be very knowledgeable and aware of, is all these federal programs that exist, so we're not duplicating services. So I will try and put a little overview together for you guys at the next committee meeting. Mr. Martin?
Well, it's kind of an adjunct to that. You know, and we've been talking about water, so it's a convenient topic, but it's easy to focus on the rural areas, the unincorporated areas, because that's our jurisdiction. But if we start saying we want to deal with municipalities that have, you know, lead pipe and what have you, I assume we can enter into cooperative agreements with
Yes.
the municipalities
Yes.
because they're getting some dough here too. And I would not want to
Yeah.
say I'm going to pay for all the lead pipe removal in Batavia or
Right.
wherever.
Absolutely, yeah. Any way we can
If I
form
knew Batavia was
partnerships.
getting money to,
Uh-huh.
that they could apply to the same thing. So
Yeah, and that's in
But
the.
Batavia would appreciate it. Thank you.
You're not biased on this one, are you? No. Carpentersville too. Yeah, in reading the guidance and the final rule, it states that you're not restricted from pooling money together with other entities to get things done, as long as we're not, say, using this as matching money with another federal program. You know, there's some limitations in that regard, but we can work with municipalities, and that's something I'll get to in the internal external requests because I think it's a very interesting opportunity we have with that. So yeah, for federal programs, we'll talk about that more at another meeting, hopefully the next one, just to make sure. So as we're, you know, getting our brain cells bouncing around and coming up with ideas, we know, okay, we don't need to go into that direction because there's already federal money we can go after. And then that will be part of the work possibly of our firm here that we hire or someone else that we bring on board to go after those grants for us and to help the community even more. Any other questions or comments on federal programs? Okay, let's move on. Internal and external requests. So this is going to be probably the biggest. Well, it's like three parts: the internal requests, the external requests, and the revenue recoupment. What we do with those three big sections. So a little different than last year where it was just internal and external. It was much more simple. We came up with a formula last year of a 55-45 split that we took from the federal government. The state received the full allotment for Kane County. The state was instructed to keep 55%, give us 45%. And then they put that 55 into programs that helped benefit the county and elsewhere. So that's what we did last year. I wanted to, at this first meeting, have some kind of structure like that. The more conversations I had with people and the more reading I did, it became harder to do that because there were so many what ifs, so many different possibilities in these three categories of spending that we basically have: internal, external, and revenue recoupment. So I don't have that, but I do think that is something that we need to work towards. We need to, as we start seeing what kinds of projects our own departments have and our own members come up with and what is out there coming from the community, I think that will help inform what these allotments could or should be. I don't want to wait for all of that information. You know, it's kind of the chicken or the egg thing. Do we wait for everybody to give us everything they want and then we say, okay, we have this much? I don't think that's the best way to go. But I feel, at least at this time, it's a little premature to say, okay, this much is going to go to the county, this much is going to go to the community. But we do need to work towards that. Mr. Shepro.
I think we're going to find that E and F are linked because as you find out what, like in the case of the first responders, it turned out there were myriad different levels. Sometimes you could bootstrap one to the other, others you could only do one or the other. And I think as we'll find out, the external, internal may be affected by what programs can bring money in.
Yes, and that was to my point under that section, is that if there's money out there outside of the ARP that can help us get some of this work done, then we should go after that. So then now we have more funds here to use, to make use of. Mr. Martin.
I have to say, I'm confused by the internal versus external request. The differentiation,
Oh,
what,
it's like the riverboat. So internal would be, if water resources or, public health or something has an idea for how to use this money, that would be internal. External would be, AID has a request, or we do a small business grant or something like that. That would be external. So
but, I mean, I guess I can see that, but if we, because it's the constant fact situation we use, if we decide we're going to replace all the lead pipe and all the wells in the county, we're not giving the money to a third party, but it's an internal, is that what you're saying?
yeah, I would say that would be if we
Us
do
giving money-
broadband.
Giving us money, again, to make it easy, to a homeless shelter. Okay, that's an external request. So even though when you compare it to the CARES Act, we flat out said we're going to give money to small businesses, a formula that they could apply under.
I think it's like.
Yeah, I see your point. It is a bit ephemeral.
I'm just, it seems to me that they kind of, they blur together.
Yeah.
We can call it, call it outside and make everybody who has a well make an application, or we can call it inside and say we're going to do a survey of wells and.
Yeah, so this is just how my initial thinking has been
Okay.
structured, just to have some kind of structure, because it is sort of, the lines are blurred. If we're doing projects out in the community, or if we're working with another entity in the community, is that an internal request or external request? So I would say the easiest one to define is external request. When we open up to, we did small business grants last year. I'm not saying we're going to do that necessarily this year or not, but that would certainly be an external request coming to us. If we want to support nonprofits, that would be an external request. If we want to do broadband or, water, that stuff, that would be an internal.
Internal.
Yeah, so it's kind of, maybe another way to think of it is, where does the idea originate? Does it originate from within the county, or does it originate from out in the community? So that could be another way to categorize it. But yeah, I see your point. It's kind of
Mr.
confusing,
Chairman,
Ms. Bates.
would an easy way to look at it be the recoupment money would be for internal and the non-recoupment money would be for external?
Well, yes and no, because the recoupment money could be used, well, it would be a form of the internal money, I would say, because we're determining how to spend that money.
Mhm.
But, it's not, we're not going to be, if we do small business grants, that would come from the ARP money. That wouldn't come from the revenue recoupment, as
Right,
far as I
right.
understand it.
Well, there are four main items, five, I guess, for the spending focus. And it seems like those are the monies that are not the recoupment. So those would be, I think, external, but.
It just depends. Like I said, I think an easier way is where does the idea originate? Does it originate from an outside entity, or does
Okay.
it originate from within the county
All right,
in
that's-
some fashion? Madam
I
Chair?
understand, I can understand that one.
I have a question, though. Aren't any money that's expended, whether internal or external, whether we're getting it from the outside or we come up organically from the inside, don't they all have to meet those funding requirements? Isn't that guideline, even though we may have more flexibility internally, aren't the guidelines basically the same? The spirit of those guidelines exactly the same?
Yeah.
So if
Yeah,
it's water
May not
from,
all apply, Shepro, to all programs, I guess, right? I mean,
Yeah, well, again.
then I'm asking the question.
Yeah, the revenue recoupment money has a different set of guidelines that's less strict. But in general, I mean, we want to follow the ARP guidelines as much as possible.
Does our state's attorney have an answer to that question?
Yes, it would all have to fall under the guidelines that the ARP has, those 4 different categories. So you are correct. In any project that is undertaken, whether it is an internal request from someone, a department head within the department, or a community outside of the King County, they all have to fall within the guidelines. Yeah.
Ms.
So,
Bates.
but, unless it's recoupment money, in which case it could be health services, environmental, school, education, blah, blah.
So if it is recoupment money, it is one of the 4 categories under ARP. And so the guidelines under the recoupment is that that money that you are allotting for the recoupment would have to go to any type of government services that you normally would have. So it's
Much
just
broader.
yeah.
correct.
So every project that comes in, it's just you would have to determine what category it could fall under. And a lot of the projects you may get, as the comments have been, will be blurred between, something that helps government services as well as helping the community, like the water projects and stuff like that.
Mr. Shepro.
Yeah, I think maybe the point of the question, all guidelines do not apply to all programs. There's unique guidelines that will apply
Thank
to
you.
different
Yeah.
categories
Correct.
depending on what they are.
Mhm.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. Did you have another comment? I see you thinking.
I am thinking, which means that any internal, I'm less worried about the external because I think we could measure that pretty accurately. But the internal requests are going to have to be verified by the consultant or legal to make sure that they meet within the guidelines required by the Treasury.
Every request will have to
Oh,
be
I know that.
verified.
I know.
External too,
Yeah.
right?
No matter what. And I want people to get creative and throw all ideas at the wall, but then we can take a look and say, okay, what's actually feasible within the guidelines? And then from there, what do we want to do?
Mhm.
What do we want to go after? But it has to be checked out, verified officially that, yes, this project falls within the parameters of the American Rescue Plan usage, and you can go for it if you want.
Mhm.
And I want to just circle back, if I may, to the government federal funding. Neither one of those budgets have been passed yet. So until the American Family Plan, I think that's the name of it, is passed, we have no idea what that funding allocation may look like and when those monies would be available for a match, which may delay our opportunity to consider doing some of that matching.
Yeah, so moving pieces, moving parts.
Mhm.
If the feds are taking too long on something, that we want to go after, we may just end up doing it ourselves. But
Or at least a
that's-
portion of it.
Yeah, or a portion of it, right.
Good, good.
So at some point, I think the internal is going to be a little easier to at least create a deadline for submissions. Last year, we opened up a portal on our website or internally so that all departments could submit their proposals to us. And I don't know if some of you remember, at one point, Roger had put together, it was a spreadsheet of, I don't know, like 120 different things. Everybody threw everything at us. And then we went through the process of saying yes to this, no to that. I imagine we would want to do something similar this time. We do have so much more time, but at the same time, we want to start getting this money out into the community. We want to start doing some good things with this. We don't want to drag our feet. We always felt like we were 2 months behind last year for various reasons. And I think we're on the ball right now. So and this is something that we'll just, through conversations with you guys, and as we see more input coming from our department heads, we'll be able to figure out, when we want to set a deadline or what that deadline will be. And also there's that, how much are we going to devote to these requests? Mr. Martin.
Using your cockamamie telescope as my example.
Great example.
If you look at this and you look at what the county can do, if we were going to build your telescope, it seems like if we build a bridge, it's a 5-year process.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time we do engineering and all of the stuff we need to do, I guess my question becomes, in practicality, does this timeline preclude capital projects as in the consideration? Because I don't know how we first determine the need, then get plans, then do and then have it spent.
Yeah.
By the end of 26. That's a pretty tight timeline.
So Mr. Coyle could correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is there's the option for pay-as-you-go funding on projects. So let's say we have a $100 million project and we want to put 20 million into it. It's not going to be done by 2026, big project like that.
So we
but
don't have to pay for
we
the
could
whole-
fund like the engineering, the phase 1. We could fund up to a certain period of time that would help us stay within that calendar, that timeline. And then the rest of the money would have to come from somewhere else. You know, we go out to bond or something like that.
Okay, all right,
Hmm.
all right.
That's what pay-go
Is that correct,
funding?
Mr. Coyle?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I do know what I'm talking about sometimes. Mr. Frost.
Two things. As of right now, transportation won't be asking for anything, so stop using bridges. I've heard that 3 times today. Roads and bridges could eat up that 105 million in about 6 months.
Yeah.
But it's common knowledge I will be pushing for some funds for a possible new building or bringing the idea forward. But I will remind you, to Mr. Martin's point, the multi-use facility went from concept to reality in 2 years. So we can certainly pull that off, especially if we were to go with the design build method. So it's entirely feasible. Plus, again, you could take certain monies and put them towards engineering and preliminary work or something like that. So
Yeah,
it's
so funding an early part of a project that
yeah,
would
but
be more long-term.
even with the 26 deadline, that's entirely within the purview of building a
It would be
building.
24 to allocate it, but yeah,
Yeah.
26 to spend it.
And we could get a telescope up in no time.
I think so. The Sanchez Observatory has a good ring to it.
Oh.
Mr. Bezos about
Why
that.
don't we get a crystal ball instead of a telescope?
It's just not the same effect. You know, one is outer space, one is inner space. It's just different. So that's just something for you
All right,
guys to start
stand your
thinking
ground,
about.
my friend.
There's a warranty problem.
We're going to want to, at some point, you know, in the next few meetings, come to a determination on a timeline, a deadline for internal requests so that we can start considering them. Does that come before the total allocation that we devote to internal requests? We have to also determine that. I'd so hope to have that answer at this first meeting, and I just don't. So maybe at the next meeting I will. Mr. Shepro.
I don't know where this quite fits, but maybe it fits here. I've had, and I'm sure others have already had, a lot of inquiries from other units of government that this time municipalities get their own allocation, but fire protection districts, townships, et cetera, do not have an allocation. And is the county going to be receptive or have a process to consider any needs or wants from those agencies? And I'm wondering how that would fit into
Yeah, so that would be like an external
external.
request, and that is something that we have to discuss and look at. You know, if we're going to help fire protection districts, what are the parameters that are eligible under the ARP? How much would that look like? And, you know, the process.
Exactly. Everything would have not just to be support lost revenue, but it would have to go to support any of the requirements of the ARP funds.
Yeah, and the lost revenue only applies to recipients. It doesn't apply to subrecipients, is my understanding. Is that right? Also, Vince?
Yeah.
Mr. Coyle? The revenue loss component only applies to recipients, not subrecipients. So if we give to fire protection districts, they can't claim lost revenue with the money.
I believe that's correct. I would have to double check on that
Okay.
one actually for subrecipients. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Brown?
question.
Use both. One of them will work.
Yeah, there you go. On the internal, this is Brown, on the internal request, let's say, for example, the court systems wants to add a new courtroom, like we just approved here recently for remodeling. Are you going to want those internal requests to go through the appropriate committees before they come to the ARP committee, or just come directly to the ARP committee with the request?
Just directly to the ARP committee. That would, to me, is the easiest way to do it. That's what we did last year. Now, if we're talking about projects that could be coming out of the revenue recoupment money, that's where, again, I was saying we have to determine what process we're going to employ, whether we have that at least in the discussion level come through the committees first, just to kind of vet things, and then it's presented to the ARP, or do we just open it up to everybody, let them, you know, figure it out, send it to finance, and hope that it all fits in the model. But I would imagine we're going to want to at least filter everything through the ARP, just so that we know it's getting checked out for eligibility and that it falls within the allotments that we have as far as money is concerned for how much we can spend. You know, if they need 10 million, but we've only got 8 million left, we have to figure something out. Is it going to be all or nothing funding, or can we just give them partial and they get the rest elsewhere? But yeah, my thought is we just have everything come through the ARP committee. And again, I spoke with Roger. It's not hard to put together a portal on our intranet so that everyone could submit their documents. Once we develop a deadline for that, maybe we don't. Maybe it'll just be open for a while. That thought scares me. I like deadlines. It makes it a little easier. Ms. Bates.
So I think you said, come to the ARP committee first, like the portal, and then it might have to go through the committee structure to finalize.
Well, with revenue recoupment money in projects, I mean, we should be open to what comes from the full board, from the committees, from those departments, as far as what's outside of the ARP guidance otherwise.
The committee wouldn't be precluded, Shepro, from originating an idea.
Exactly.
But consistent with the CARES Act, once it's come here, the CARES Act went directly to the board, as I recall.
Yeah.
And not back to a committee process.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, because we want to try and keep things clean, but again, we want ideas to be open. So I think it helps this committee get a lot of work done by allowing all of the other standing committees and the departments that report to them to bring some ideas forward that we can then look at it all and weigh everything and fit it within our structure that we come up with.
I would just like some clarification on the process, because the process to me is important. So we'll use back to water. Okay, so if the Jody Walnut has a project in mind to check all the wells, the level of all the wells, do an analysis of that. She does not have to go directly to her committee, who can filter, water filter, I didn't mean to use that, but to filter that appropriately for their discussion and then bring it up to the ARP committee. You're suggesting that she comes directly to this committee for an approval and then goes back to the committee that she reports to.
No. So how we did it last year, we developed our formula for how much would be internal, and then we opened it up to all the departments to send in their requests for projects, for money. And then we, as the CARES Act committee at that time, determined, what are we going to allow? What are we going to say yes to? Because the total requests were far outside of the amount we had available. And I imagine we'll have a similar scenario this year. So it doesn't have, how we did it last year, it came to the CARES Act committee and then it went to the county board. It didn't go back to like, okay, now, transportation's got an idea, comes to us, and then we send it back to transportation and then up the chain to the county board. So what I'm saying is with ARP specific requests, programs that are assumed to be within the guidelines of the ARP outside of revenue loss, the public health and safety, infrastructure and all that, those requests would come directly to this committee. And I've already received some. Ms. Wolnick sent me some. Mr. Van Kerkhoff, Mr. Hain, Sheriff Hain. We've gotten some feedback already from departments, and then those will get filtered more appropriately into the portal once we open that up on our internal website, and so that we can have a whole list of all of the internal projects. But with the revenue loss portion, the recoupment money, it has a little different set of rules and guidelines with what we can do. So I think that is a good opportunity for all the committees and the related departments to kind of brainstorm and say, hey, well, we could do this, we could do that, we could go in this direction or that direction and come up with some ideas and then filter that back to the ARP committee to look at and fit that within what our plan is.
So
and
you're
say yes or no.
differentiating then external versus internal. Internal requests coming through the committees. External funding can't come independently from the departments. Is that
Well,
what
I think
heard you say?
it would all be internal requests, but it's just a subcategory of the internal requests. Does it come from the committees through the revenue recoupment guidelines, ideas, or does it come from the departments directly to this committee as an internal request that falls under the ARP guidance?
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's more broad guidelines for the revenue recoupment. So that's where I think committee conversations and discussions with the department heads would be good. It'd get a lot of ideas going. Mr. Martin?
I didn't mean to butt in. I just wanted you to turn your head so you could see it.
I saw you first.
Okay. It's been suggested that perhaps a way of assuring process and having appropriate committee involvement would just be for the department heads to talk to the committee chairman,
Mhm.
you know, and if they think it's great, it's great. If they want to poll the committee, they don't need to have a meeting for that. They could get on the phone and call the 6 people and talk with them. But that way the committees are included without the cumbersome aspect of having to have a meeting and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And it'd be informal, but still let everybody feel like they were
Yeah.
participatory.
Yeah. And so this is just something that, again, I didn't want us to have all figured out today, but start thinking about this. What is an agreeable way? And I know you like to have short meetings, Mr. Martin, so I understand why you're coming up with that suggestion. Not another discussion item on my agenda. But yes, so.
I really do support having the board and the committee's input on these decision-making process, because we are, again, if don't mean to be political, but we are representing our constituents. And we need to make sure as representatives of the constituents that we have their voices in mind as well. And the staff and getting input from committee chairs, I think, and the committee, I think is vital to making very good decisions, to make sure that there is input. I trust staff complicitly. I mean, we all know that and they're great, but just having that opportunity to have board engagement with that as we come forward, I think is critical to a real public process.
Yeah, and I agree, because sometimes, you know, when conversations happen, ideas occur that would not have normally occurred otherwise. You know, cross-pollinating ideas is a term I like to use a lot. So I'm certainly in line with that ideal. But however we want to slice it or tranche it as it is. Mr. Shepro.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we started with the notion that the committees are free to come up with any ideas they want. It's the process at the end. It's not going to go back through a committee to be dissected once this committee has come to a recommendation. That will then go to the full board. And then I think everybody's concern could be accommodated. I did one question. With the CARES Act money, there was kind of some portion that was semi-mandated. Like, for example, I think the contact tracing we had to do because of State Department of Public Health. So I'm wondering, is there any task which is going to be covered by the ARP funding that would fall into the category of a set aside? We're going to have to do X.
I'm not aware
of any, but I wondered if.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that. I haven't heard that. Mr. Coyle is shaking, or yeah.
From my reading of the interim final rule so far, there is no specific requirement in this ARP funds as that I see now.
Except $10 million for early childhood education.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, I didn't get to that part yet, but thank you for letting me know. Yes, Ms. Bates.
So among the spending focus is COVID-19 mitigation. And I think we should keep in mind that there may be a need for booster shots. That just came out in the news lately. So there may be a point where we have to reopen Carson's or, you know, reopen Sam's Club, some mass vac sites, because these variants are pretty scary right now. And I think that would come out of this.
So I just met with Health Department employees, Kathy Foster, Michael Isaacson, and Uche Onwuta the other day to say, where are you guys at on your requests? Let's talk about some ideas. And that is definitely something that is going to be part of their request is, you know, how much are we going to think that we might need for ongoing vaccine distribution services? I know for right now, the Batavia site, I think we have through December or November.
We have a lease on the building until November, and currently it's opened on Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Carpentersville site we're hanging on to. We've got that until the end of the year if we need to open more.
Because this ain't over till it's over.
Yeah, right.
So.
And then the same thing with the contact tracing, that is something that we are mandated, or public health department is mandated to do. But for right now, we do have state funding But knowing that sometimes that funding runs out and we're kind of left in the lurch, that will be part of their request as well, covering future contact tracing in the event that we need that money. But if not, then that money will actually be able to come back to this committee to be distributed, as happened last year with the health department. So moving on to external requests, again, it's a little more fluid. We are going to want to establish an amount and also a deadline for requests. So that's something that we'll have to discuss and get figured out all at the same time. It's this chicken and egg scenario. The town halls may be something that sort of affect when we want to have that deadline, because if we're going to do town halls, getting public input, do we want to give them our ideas for what we're doing and then they give us input on that? Or do we want it, that's something we'll discuss in the outreach section, but just a lot of moving pieces. Another idea that has come up is even having to help in this process for external awards, kind of, what do they call it? The member initiative money, like they have in Springfield, where each board member gets a certain amount of money. They go to their districts, they try and find a way to spend that money. Maybe it is going to go to an organization that would be an external request, but it's a solid fit. Maybe it's something they partner with the municipality on. So that's an idea that has come up, I think is a good one that we're going to want to flesh out a little bit more and make sure that we're going to fall within the safe guidance of the ARP.
And I spoke with Michelle Neerman about that idea, where each of the 24 board members would be allocated a certain amount of money. And we can use the term earmark and use it appropriately. It's not a negative term, but that is the term for it. Just as we received earmark money from some of our congressional representatives for transportation needs. And this would be similar to that for all 24 members to be able to go out to the community, to be able to meet with community members and allocate within your district that allocation. You can work with partnerships, perhaps urban areas like Elgin and Aurora may want to partner with each other since you have similar needs to gather that money together. But that would be up to the determination of each of the individual board members, who would then have to report that money back or get approval to expend that money to make sure that it does go through the appropriate guidelines.
No stained glass windows in parking lots.
Nope.
And no telescopes.
I'm not going to stop trying.
But I think this, and Ms. Neerman said at first blush that this would be fine, so that we can really give it careful consideration if that's something you would like to do. It would certainly force all of you to get out to the community and to hear their individual voices and be very grounded on what that specific district needs.
Yeah, I feel if everyone's got $100,000, they're going to get out there and find some way to spend it. So it also helps this community get interactive with the municipalities and with the organizations throughout the county. It's another way to be a conduit and to help this committee really make good decisions, so that when we make our final determinations and we send our money out, we don't have anybody in the county coming to us saying, oh, we would have asked for something, or we could have used help for this. Like last year with the CARES Act money, we had that scenario. It was an emergency situation. We didn't have time to really get out there so much. It was very difficult. But it was sad to see, entities come back later and say, well, yeah, we could have helped you, but sorry, so that's just, again, something we're going to have to determine as we go along, the deadlines, the amounts, how we're going to do this, reaching out to the community through board members. I personally, when it comes to thinking about external and also internal projects, I would prefer to prioritize assisting existing programs and organizations. Not saying that we can't do short-term funding and help for things that are out there, but the more we can send money out to a program that exists rather than creating that program, I personally will be in favor of that. I would imagine people that here last year through the CARES Act process would also think, yes, let's just help people that are already doing this stuff. Like with the rental assistance, we handed it off to the state right away. We could have created a rental assistance program, but that would have just been so burdensome. And so I think with these requests, especially the external requests, that we should at least prefer helping something that already exists. And that's what I was telling the public health department as well. They could create all kinds of programs, but is that the best way to go? What do they have going already that just needs some more cash, just needs a little influx of money, and it'll really help achieve their goals, meet the need in the community. And also things that have a lasting impact. Again, there's short-term uses built into this, but it would be the best case scenario that all this money goes to things that outlast the money after it's spent. So as we consider all these things, we want to try and look for a lasting impact beyond 2026. We've already talked about municipal partnerships. I've spoken with Leslie Melendi from the Metro West Council of Government, and trying to spread the word that way. They used to come to our meetings every time because we were going to be handing money to the municipalities. Now the municipalities are getting their own from the state, and they still haven't gotten that yet. I've heard that it might not be until August when they get it, but that's again something that we want to be very open to. How do we stretch these dollars that we have? How do we work with the other recipients or sub-recipients to get a good effect out in the community? Ms. Bates?
Bates, please. Do we know how much the municipalities are receiving?
Yes.
Yes. I have the chart here somewhere. I can send it to you. I don't need to pull it up right now. Okay, yeah. So Elgin's getting around 19 million. Aurora's getting around 30 million.
Of getting money.
Yeah, everybody's getting a little money, no matter.
Please remember that some of our, sorry to interrupt, but some of our municipalities are in different counties. So we have to make sure that any allocation we do is specifically for Kane County.
Yes, yeah, that's another thing. The
Chairman
other counties can
Sanchez,
help
Sturgis here.
themselves. Mr. Sturgis, go ahead.
Yeah, if you could send that out, that would be so beneficial, or at least the link to it. And is just so I'm kind of clear on the understanding, is there a threshold? Are all municipalities getting something, or is there a specific like size threshold or population threshold to receive anything?
Yeah, all municipalities are getting something, and I think there was a formula that was based on population.
Okay, yeah, if you could send that link, that would be so appreciated.
Sure.
For conversation.
I think it was actually in the newspapers.
Yeah, it might have been in the newspapers. I know, yeah, I'll send that out to everybody.
Thanks, Jay.
Also, not only municipal partnerships, but partnerships with federal legislators. I know Madam Chair and I have met with Congressman Bill Foster already, and we have a meeting coming up with Representative Lauren Underwood. We're going to see what kind of stuff we can do with the big boys and big girls that go to Washington. Just something for us to be open-minded to and see what we can make happen. And I'm okay with doing grant programs like we did last year, the business grant program. And I know many of you hearing that might say, oh no, we cannot do that. That was a nightmare. And you're right, it was, because we didn't have the appropriate level of staff to administer the program properly. And that is a mistake. If we go in that direction, if we want to do some kind of small business grant or other kind of grant that would go out to many, many different recipients, we can only do that if we are going to have the proper staff to back it up, and not county staff. The firm we hire, and if they don't have the capacity to run these programs, we will hire somebody else that will. So just to keep in mind, I started off thinking about all this like, nope, we are not going anywhere near a business grant program. But it was such a nightmare. That last month that I was chair of the CARES Act committee in December, when we had to try and close it out, it just showed how much of an effect the lack of good resources can have on a program, because it wasn't fair to the people that were administering the program. It wasn't fair to Fabiola, to Scott and his team. It wasn't fair. So I'm open-minded if you guys are, but we have to have the something to back it up with.
If I may, one of the requirements or suggested industries that have been greatly impacted because of the pandemic is our tourism industry. And that includes our hotels, restaurants who have entertainment, our entertainment venues, both for-profit and not-for-profit. They have had the largest impact in lost revenue than any other industry. So these are including our movie theaters. So this is an industry that we'll be meeting with, I believe, next week or the following week. And this is an industry that, as far as business support, because all of these, whether for-profit or not-for-profit, are part of the fabric of our community. And we have to make sure that we listen to them. And this is a business, if we're going to do businesses, that the federal government has said that we should carefully take a look at to support.
Yeah, so a lot to consider there, Mr. Shepro.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo your comments, though, is that the problem with the business grants was twofold. One was lack of time, but the other was attempting, and this is a concern I would have about anything that's going to, for example, even in the entitlement industry, there will have to be some criteria, and largely subjective, one would imagine, in terms of what is the need, how do you identify it? And that strikes me as being potentially an administrative nightmare to try to differentiate people who say, even with the businesses, I lost money. We didn't attempt to verify, identify, and I don't know that we really could have. And the larger the universe of people you're trying to help, the harder the task is going to be. So,
Well, with the business grants, we did have a way for them to show lost revenues and the impact that COVID had. And we would come up with a similar thing, except it wouldn't be as cumbersome for the applicants. We'll try and hold their hand a little more and make sure that whatever they need to submit, it's not going to be too difficult for them. Because there's a lot of small businesses, for an example,
and kind of
that just couldn't do it.
Related point is it would be good if when, and I'm sure they haven't developed it yet, but even in our discussions, understanding all these guidelines and rules is very difficult. And it would be great if the government or somebody, the consultant, would be able to develop a user-friendly description of what the rules are, so we don't confuse people or have a lot of time wasted in people applying for things that they're not going to be eligible for.
Right. Or asking questions that can be answered by a document or
And I assume there'll be an
tutorial.
FAQ
I
put
mean,
out by the Treasury at some point.
Yeah. So,
Chairman Sanchez, Sturgis again.
Mr. Sturgis.
On behalf of all of those businesses, all of those frustrating businesses that don't have the sophistication, that others might, their appreciation for the consideration that we showed them and the money that we allocated to them is second to none. It was the difference on most between staying in business and shutting their doors. And I know, like, we try and make a one shoe fits all sort of scenario, and it didn't go as smoothly at our end, but that doesn't negate the appreciation that was felt at the other end. And I just want to, continue to just reach out and advocate on their behalfs.
Thank you, Mr. Sturgis. So yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know I'm not opposed to the idea, but again, we have to have proper resources behind it. Another thing too, I thought to have a survey. There is in the guidance, it has the reporting categories, all the main categories of things that you can do. And so I thought to put together a small survey to send out to everyone, just to start as part of our conversation, just to see, where are people at? What are some of the things that people are more interested or less interested? Not saying that that's going to dictate where we go, but it'll help inform our conversations going forward. So just, I will send that out to everyone before our next meeting and ask that you return it. Ms. Bates?
Do we have needs assessment reports available to us already for what the community needs are?
I don't know, but I know with the evidence clearinghouses that there may be some data that are available that we can use right now to say, oh yeah, there is a stronger need for, help in this sector or that sector. But I haven't gotten that far in my research yet myself. Okay, I think that's all I've got for that. Anyone else have any questions, comments, or concerns for the internal and external requests? Madam Chair.
I'm thinking about what some of these are very meaningful questions, and the research that's available that we already have in-house. Jody Walnuck has needs assessments on water. Scott Berger has needs assessments on housing and rent relief. We know that for a fact, and job. He could give us the information, as well as Mark Van Kerkhoff is here, on the tourism industry that I was speaking about, what the actual quantifier is of economic impact here in the county. So I think those documents already exist. And we just have to know to ask for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm thinking agriculture as well. Another important sector of our county that I would love to see us supporting. So yeah, thank you for that question, Ms. Bates. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, next section, public outreach. Again, there's language in the final rule and in the guidance about, what are you doing to reach out to the public? What are you doing to include your constituents' thoughts, feelings, and ideas in your process? So that's just something for us all to think about how we can take part in that. I know we have Kane County Connects. We can do press releases, the idea of town halls, but also we have social media. Some of us are on social media, others aren't, but those who are, can help spread the word when we have a program that is available for people to apply to, and whatever local connections you have with, governments or businesses or just people, just getting the word out there. I'm going to kind of encourage everyone to take part in that. Mr. Martin?
I would like, from my perspective, before we begin to seek public input, that we have some idea as to where we're headed. Not making final determinations or anything, but I don't want to broadcast a request that says we've got money here and we'd like to help you, and then just let people come in and ask. I think we need to have our act together and some kind of a structure in place so that we can, when we broadcast whatever it is we're going to broadcast, we can say, here are the parameters. This is what we're focused on, and begin the painting with a broad brush. Because if we start, if we get too finite with this, we'll go nuts and not do a good job.
So I'm hearing that you're applying for the subcommittee on town halls.
No.
But that is the the big idea for public outreach, town halls, and I'll let Madam Chair kind of lead that part of the conversation.
I totally agree with you, and I had this conversation with Chairman Sanchez as well. I think it's important that we develop our guidelines with, of course, again, you are representatives of your communities. So you are their voices right now. You are elected to be their voices. To have the guidelines established by us, because we could fund a myriad of things, but what have we decided to generally focus on? But indeed, if there is an allocation of $50,000, we're just going to use that as an estimate amount of money that we would allocate to each one of 24 board members pending board approval and the committee's approval. That way, if you wanted to develop microfunding for a business or for a not-for-profit, if you want to collaborate with that, perhaps agricultural needs some help with that to help farmers in whatever manner that would be, then that money then could be expended appropriately in your district to do exactly what we're afraid could happen, open up those floodgates, because you would have control of that floodgate within your community to really support the micro part of the request, which are needed. So I think we could do broad brush and controlled, as well as really get down into the meat of it.
With guidelines.
Yes, of course, all within the guidelines. But I will lean on you, Madam Chair, to spearhead the subcommittee on town halls. We've been talking about it, but this is the idea you brought, and I think it's a good idea. We just want to do it. We want to do it right. We don't want it to, be too diffuse and messy, but we do want to show that we are engaging the public in the process, that we are open to the ideas coming from our constituents. That is something that is mentioned multiple times in the guidance and in the interim final rule. It's how are you reaching your people? Or are you just doing this all on your own and you're not really listening to the public? Ms. Wonke.
Thank you, Jarrett. Is this over and above the town hall, over and above what the municipalities will be receiving? Because they're getting money and they want to reach out to their constituents. So are we kind of repeating that unless we have a large area that's unincorporated, which of course is our jurisdiction? So, I mean, do we want to join, would I want to join with the president of the Village of Campton Hills and have town hall meetings and say, look, you've got this money, we have this money.
Yeah.
What are your desires?
Now
on
that you're
how to
saying that,
spend the money.
it would be easier for us if every municipality did their own town hall and just included the county as part of that.
There you go.
That conversation. And if we had something to give them, like, here's where we're at so far in our process,
Right.
what feedback we could get from that, that could be an interesting way to go about it. But
That could be one way. And when we were talking, Chairman Sanchez and I thought it'd be following Mr. Martin's suggestion to be much more directed. So obviously I'm going to be stumping for early childhood support to help our working families get back to work. And if that were be a selected item that this committee chose that we're going to be focusing on, I would ask people who are in that area to come to that town hall to talk about what their needs are, because that would be the specialist town hall, rather than just reaching out to the general population, which Campton Hills may do, asking for their requests. I know I'm seeing AID here. They're very much in support of affordable housing initiatives, especially for people who are developmentally disabled. So if we were going to be focusing on that, which is a compromised community, I would certainly reach out to Lori and say, who do we know? Who can we bring together to talk about what those needs are so that we can have segmented support for that? So that would be the idea of the big town halls.
Yeah.
So that'll go along with, I guess we spoke a little bit earlier about possibly earmarking money for each county representative. So that would kind of combine with what the municipalities have received. And
yeah,
okay,
another way of helping figure out those partnerships.
exactly.
Because if it's just left to these committee members here to go out and do that, that's more of a difficult task than 24 of us going out and doing that and then bringing it back here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, town halls. Oh, Mr. Martin.
I'd like to play the part of the devil's advocate relative to individual pots to distribute within our district. In my mind, when the money comes into the county, we're to be addressing the issues of the county's residents and not the governmental districts within the county. And some areas may need more help than others.
Mm-hmm.
And if everybody gets the same amount of money, whatever that sum is, I think of things like the alderman's prerogative in Chicago, and I think earmarks are great if they're paying for intersections and stuff that make a lot of sense. They're also suspect. They're also at risk of A, being abused, B, creating issues that if the board were to make these decisions and the committee and move these ahead, we might have the opportunity to make certain that all the individuals are treated fairly, more so than if we were to give money to say that I got 50,000 and you got 50,000. I don't know. I don't know that I'm making myself clear. I
think it's how we do it.
I'm not certain I'm on board with the concept of, I mean, the risk is you're going to have a line of people and each representative gets to sit and say, now, who am I going to make it look are my favorite?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it ends up being healthy to the process.
So my understanding of how that could work is that that wouldn't be the only amount that could go out into those communities, but it's a way to help the board get involved with their communities and to help bring to this committee projects and ideas from the community that could be done. But let's say, you have $3 million worth of stuff that comes your way from your district. You only got 100,000. Well, it doesn't mean we won't look at the rest of those requests. It just means that you're bringing us this $100,000 request, and all of the other ones, as long as they fall within the ARP guidelines, they can still submit to us. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, then let them submit.
Yeah.
I mean, I have,
Sure.
we'll save the conversation for when it's really our conversation.
Yeah.
It's
just,
as I sit here today, I'm uncomfortable with the concept of us doing what in some circumstances hasn't worked well on other governmental bodies.
Yeah, it's a nascent idea. Mr. Brown.
On here, keep in mind with this thought of what Mr. Martin's talking about here, between now and 2026, we're going to be drawing new lines and having 2 elections.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true as well. So we got to spend that money this year.
Spend it before the election.
Yeah, we got to spend it before the elections. Mr. Berman, and then this one.
Mr. Berman here. I agree with Mr. Martin. You know, if you have money to distribute yourself, you can either be a hero or a goat. So depending on, you know, who's receiving it. And so I'd much rather have the committee go through it rather than have individuals.
And I just want to clarify that I'm not opposed or in favor of earmarking money to every district representative. It was just something that was brought up earlier, and I'm just taking it all in, so.
Yeah, it's an idea that's come up, and it's a potential mechanism we can use to help get the county board involved, bring ideas to this committee.
Thank you.
Ms. Allen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The riverboat funds, when I first came on the board, were done as trades. If you'll support my project in Hinterland, I'll support your project in southern Wachovia. It was a real improvement to that process when we started doing it not so subjectively, when all of the grant requests came in, were reviewed, were measured for leverage, were measured for need, and so on. That's just a little something from the past. It worked better when there was a process than when it was horse trading. Thank
you, Ms. Allen. Mr. Shepro?
I am somewhat reminded of Abe Lincoln's comment in another context that
history lesson.
When you do something like this, you got 20 applicants and you'll have 19 enemies and 1 ingrate.
Or a goat.
Mr. Lincoln said that, so.
I think we have a comment. Would you accept a comment from the audience?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Ms. Baker, would you like to step up to the mic?
I have to leave, so I just wanted to mention a couple things. I'm Lori Baker, President and CEO of the Association for Individual Development, and we do really care about affordable housing and access to mental health care and other things that this funding could do. So I just wanted to offer one, non-entitlement areas can apply to the state. The state has $734 million that are for non-entitlement areas in the state of Illinois. So if there are townships or other places, and we've been encouraging some of those townships like Elgin Township and Dundee Township, et cetera, to apply for some of those funds to help meet some needs. So when you're thinking about whether or not you share or distribute to other things, they actually have the opportunity to get some funds of their own if they're interested in that. When you're thinking about looking at the other federal programs, remember that will take long periods of time to get that money in. I would argue that there is never enough money in the world for mental health services. So it's really not duplication of effort. It's expanding access for all people and people that have been adversely affected by COVID, because we're seeing much higher needs. So the idea of getting money out to in particular, mental health and other nonprofit social service agencies that are providing supportive services to people in order to get more staff in to meet the need. I mean, that's basically the issue, is that we can't hire enough people because we can't compete with wages. And so if there's the ability to have some recruitment, sign-on bonuses and retention payments that we could give to people that come work in mental health in Kane County, I think that would get things rolling pretty quickly. And I respect the idea of you having a set idea or plan of what you want to do with this money before you go out to the community. But the experts in the community actually know like what the big issues are and what the big holes are. So before you set your plan totally, you might want to talk with a variety of experts in some of the fields that are out there in order to help you make that decision of what buckets you're going to put money into and how you're going to run those processes. And the last thing I wanted to say was that Kane County Public Health Department just put out their health assessment of the county that they do. And so there's that needs assessment that's out there, of which mental health is the #1 priority again. And substance use services is #4. And, lots of general access stuff in between for other types of health. So, and when you think about contract tracing, there's a lot of money that you probably don't realize is in the county right now through the Illinois Health Practice Alliance that has subfunded its federal CARES money that's for support of public health workers. And so, for example, AID has 4 public health workers, but there's a bunch of different entities within Kane County and across the region that have been awarded funding. And part of what they can do is some contract tracing and support of people that either are positive or have been adversely affected. They're really working on trying to get people to vaccination, et cetera. So just be aware that money is out there and being spent as well. And it's a huge amount of money across the region. So, some things are being kind of layered, and maybe those folks don't have as much work as they would have had a year ago, right? If that money would have been able to get out then, because our numbers, thank God, are really low in Illinois right now, and hopefully will stay that way, knock on wood. Anyway, just wanted you to know those things, and I'm really apologize, but I have to leave for 11 a.m. meeting, but thank you very much for all that you do.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Baker. I appreciate your comments. Okay, so I think that's it for public outreach, unless anybody has anything. Hearing and seeing none. Let's move on to contingency fund. That's something that we had last year, a total of 93 million. We did a $5 million contingency fund. We're getting about overall 103 or something like that this year and next year altogether. I think it would probably be in our best interest to just do the same $5 million contingency fund. Is there any thoughts on that from any of you right now? Fund meaning, so when we categorized where all the money is going to go to, internal, external, and whatnot, we had a contingency fund held that could be used for anything. So if we were short on a program and we wanted to devote some more money for it, all we had to do is move it from contingency. We didn't have to alter our plan that we developed that was kind of set in stone, more or less, in words. So that's something I think we should do again. $5 million seems to be another good amount. Is there anyone who would not be in favor of a $5 million contingency fund? Okay, because I think that's something that we could probably have in a resolution for the next meeting, along with the first year of revenue recoupment. So then meeting
Sanchez,
frequency.
Surges
Oh, sir, just go ahead.
Jay, how do you remember the size of the contingency we used on the last round? Was it comparable?
Yeah, it was 5 million.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, we've spent every penny. And we move stuff around. So that's another thing I know. We're going to come up with a plan, and then as things progress, they progress, then we may want to move some more things around. It's just the nature of these kinds of projects, it seems. So for meeting frequency, I don't want to do weekly meetings. We don't need to do weekly meetings like we did with the CARES Act, but monthly is too long. So my thought is we're going to do every 2 weeks for the next few months as we're really developing the majority of our plan. So if that's agreeable to everybody, if not, sorry. We got to get this stuff done though. But once we have the majority of the work done and our projects are going, I imagine we can then go to just a monthly, once a month meeting or an as needed basis. and I'm just thinking in the next year, because this money, I mean, this goes until 2027 if you're talking about the reporting. We still have the CARES Act committee that exists because we may have to come back to that and do some final last minute decision making. So yeah, I think just for the next few months, keep that in mind. I don't think we'll have it right now, but what is a good time for everybody? What is a good date? My first thought is to pick a day where we already have county meetings and then we can just piggyback on that. I know it can be kind of long for some people, but other counties, they will sit and have these kinds of meetings. They will meet for 5 or 6 hours. They'll take breaks. They'll cater in food as Madam Chair has done for us very graciously before. So that's something. And also possibly on a day where the meetings that are held before ours, Karen Miner is the one who is the secretary because we have Karen Hames doing our meetings. So if she can have her other work done in the morning and then come to this meeting afterwards, that would be ideal. So if you guys can start thinking about that and then just send me some feedback so that we can really have that. But for the next one, we don't need to set it right now, but I want to set it soon. 2 weeks from now, if we did another Friday, I don't know how that works for everybody, but otherwise we can look at the calendar and then I'll send some potential times and dates to everybody and we'll just go from there. So in the next week or less, let's get that figured out. If we can get a set, a regular kind of day that we meet. Any thoughts right now before we? Fridays, yeah. I'm more partial to Tuesday through Thursday myself.
I would agree with that.
Always open. Mondays are not going to happen, Mike.
Mr. Kenyon also suggested Saturday afternoon.
If it's at his farm and he's got
Good luck with
cocktails, maybe we can talk about that. But
I don't like Friday either.
I don't like
Yeah.
Fridays.
Friday, okay. All right. Well, let's look at the Tuesday through Thursday,
It's good.
and then yeah, just start sending me your thoughts. Email me, text me, call me.
There's
Throw a rock at the
committee
window.
often met in the afternoon.
Yes, yeah, and I also would like to try and avoid afternoon meetings if we could. That's why my ideal is to piggyback on existing meetings, and then if we do like every 2 Wednesdays or something, and there's not committee meetings that day, then we can just have ours at 9 a.m.
I mean, 3.
We're going to do
Yeah.
potlucks at your house. Is that what I'm hearing?
In my apartment, sure.
Okay.
We all squeeze on my balcony.
Yeah.
Or
Or 11:30 with a short break or something. Yeah, that'd be.
Some committees don't do an hour though. You got to be
Absolutely.
careful.
So we gotta,
Yeah.
it's
No short break between meetings.
no short break in between meetings.
No short break. Okay.
But I will consider catering and food for some long days because I think that does help everyone's morale, including my own. So, okay, well, that's it for me. We have new business really quickly, the discussion on approving RFPs for administrative support. Hopefully you all took a look at it. Does anyone have any objections to having those sent out? Because all we need from this committee right now is a consensus, and then we will have those sent out today, I imagine. So no objections, no changes, additions, deletions, anything? Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I think I sent you an email. My only concern would be to make it very clear whether it be this project manager or the firm that's going to handle any of these programs that we come up with has very good communication skill with the applicants or board members or whoever, that they don't have to wait days to get a response from an email or a phone call.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion. And it's, again, something that we've learned from the CARES Act last year. We weren't able to be responsive nearly as responsive as we wanted with the applicants. And so I don't know if that's, if there's a way that Vince could just tweak the lane, just throw a line in there that says we need, if we get an email today, they get an email today, that kind of thing. So I think it's a great
Could be
suggestion.
a 1 or 2 sentence addition.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, seeing and hearing no objections,
just
Madam Chair.
as we go through the RFPs, I think it's important that we do have a separate project manager who is independent of the firm that we hire, just simply because there's checks and balances with that. We'd have somebody who's working more intimately with this committee, who would be a representative for this, the voice for this committee, and then having the firm being the economic balance, the accounting balance.
And doing all the work, the paperwork and all that. And I that's where my thinking is more focused too. We have a separate project manager. what do you guys think? Would you just rather we do have the RFP out for the separate project manager and then the firm does not include that? Because right now there is the option when we're looking for a firm in the RFP, there is the option like, can you do these services, but can you also give us a project manager? Do we want to just shy away from that and have it separate?
Put the RFP out now and see what
See what
proposals
shakes.
you get, and then
See what comes back? Okay.
supplement that.
All right. Yeah. So well, then we'll just put them all out. We'll see what comes back. 'Cause either way, we're going to have applicants for the project manager.
Right.
So, okay.
Can't hear you.
I can see some synergy in having the project manager and the firm, the consulting firm from the same firm.
Mhm. Could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll put them all out there and then we'll come back to the committee when we have something. So how long does it take? You said there's a 10-day.
Yes, I believe it's a 10-day calendar. Calendar days are required before you can select. So if we get it
Okay.
out today, by the next meeting, you should hopefully have applicants that you can review and maybe select.
Already have reviewed and then everyone has an opinion.
Correct.
At the next meeting. So yeah, at the next meeting, revenue. I forgot the other one, RFPs. It's all here. I'll go back to the notes. Don't worry. Anybody else have any questions or comments? So we have a consensus on that. There's no other business, no executive session. Mr. Kenyon isn't here, but he's not a member of the committee to. Yeah. Anyone like
He
to
left
motion to
the-
adjourn? Mr. Fraz motions, Mr. Brown seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.